everybody, welcome back inside the Staff Project's All Japan Touring Car Championship Series. So this video, we're going to take a look at the 1988 season. There are a few kits that are available specifically for the 1988 season. Not a great deal, and we're still working on, as I was talking about in the original video, the liveries that are available for the Tamiya Ford Sierra RS 500 Group A car, because there are, like I said, at least 4 sets of liveries available from modelers, which again is a Japanese nowadays resin company, but back in their early 2000s was producing decals for various Japanese racing series. I've tracked down a couple of them as far as what seasons they belong to, but it become a thing that we may have to go just back over as I can find them to sort of update what the Sierras will race as far as their livery options. There are 2 other race kits for the 1988 season that we'll go over, and then as we go into the later 1980s and early 1990s and even into the mid 1990s, you'll see there's a great deal more things to play with as it stands right now. Will that change over time? More than likely, with some of the kits that we would sort of expect to see over time, but that's the last video for the speculation of the future. The first thing I want to cover before we delve into the 1988 season will be a few kits that I dug up that would fit into the original video from covering sort of the 1985 to 1987 seasons. A few things that, a couple of these I wasn't even aware of. I just went out sort of trolling the waters, as it were, to see if I had missed anything. The 3 of these kits I didn't know about, but without really delving very deep into them, I wasn't aware what seasons they represented exactly, and so we have that covered now. So the first kit I want to talk about real quick is one of 2 Fujimi kits that are available to represent the R30 Skylines that ran in the very, very early seasons. This first one for the RS Turbo is kind of a unique vehicle. I apologize for the quality of the photos on a couple of these. You're working with Google Images as best you can, and not a lot of pictures of these kits exist, mainly because they're getting to be a little old at this point, and they've not been reissued probably for 15 to 20 years. So, of course, the risks with buying these kits, if you can find one in the first place, would be what condition the decals would be in, as there obviously are not replacement decals for these. But this car right here represents a very sort of interesting choice by Fujimi, as it is a one-off vehicle. This vehicle, this Skyline, was raced at one race period. Would be the 3rd race of the season for the 1985 season. So this is an original season car. The thing to look out for on Fujimi kits of their early Skylines, or their early 80s Skylines anyway, is the fact that these are sort of, more toy than model, in the sense that the chassis are generic. You're building the interior off the top of the chassis pan. These kits don't have full roll cages in them. They only sort of have the back, sort of a roll hoop behind the seat, and then the pipes that would go into the parcel shelf kind of thing. So you will have to scratch build the portion covering from basically behind the seat to the front A-pillars, across the windshield, and then down on both sides of the driver's doors, or the passenger door as well, obviously. So that's, like I said, a very, very interesting car. The car did not finish. It's, like I said, it's a very interesting one-off choice of why that specific vehicle. It may be because it was one of the first R30s that was ever raced, and they had licensing for the vehicle itself. The other Fujimi kit that is available for the early years is this. This is the Tomica-sponsored R30 RS Turbo, and this was for the 1986 race season. Pretty much all of the R30s in 1986 had the same color scheme, the same striping package. Their actual sponsors themselves and the color of the stripes varied between the I want to say there were 4 teams that ran this car, but the the stripes were all positioned in the same place. The cars all effectively look more or less the same. Both of these cars, actually the 1985 car and the 1986 car, are Hesemi Motorsports cars. This, of course, is a very famous name that you will want to remember in this series, because that name will pop up over and over and over again, especially as we get into the late 80s and early 1990s. Probably one of the other famous, the next second most famous Japanese touring car drivers out there, other than Hoshino, who, of course, would also become a very, very famous driver in the late 80s and early 1990s, and go on to found the Impol company, which, of course, if you're into Japanese racing of any sort at all, Impol is a sponsor for a good number of Nissan vehicles from the 1980s through the current day. They still are, an active company. They do engine tuning, body modifications, and all sorts of things specifically for Nissan, because both Hesemi and Hoshino were Nissan factory drivers. Hesemi would win the touring championship in, 1989, 1990, and 1992, I believe it is, and then Hoshino would win in 1991. So there's actually going to be a span of time that you're going to see as we go along, from 1990, when the R32 GTR comes into play, until 1993, which is the last season the R32 GTR is in the touring car under Group A before it goes off into its Super GT life, basically. Those cars will win, I believe it is 29 of 31 events, and they're going to win all of the championships during those years as well. Those cars, most of them, at least the championship cars, are either decals or actual kits, as you'll see as time goes along here. So those are the two Fujimi kits. Again, the 1985 car and the 1986 car. Now, for 1987, and these are relatively new kits within the context of what they are. They were issued in the mid to late 2000s as sort of a 5-kit series that Aoshima rather would do, called Racing Spirits. There are 2 Corolla 11s in this series as well, which are based on sort of the initial D Corolla 11s that we all know and love. Filming with kids, always an adventure. So anyway, these kits were developed again in the mid 2000s. I know I'm repeating myself, but I'm not sure exactly where I left and where I'm going to cut the edit at. So if I'm repeating myself, just deal with it. Go get yourself some small children. You'll learn to live the life. Anyway, these kits were done in the mid 2000s. They're based on the original 1980s R30 tooling that Aoshima did. So that is a generic motorized chassis. The body is from the 1980s and things like that. Both cases, the Fujimi and the Aoshima, the bodies are not really an issue in terms of fidelity and accuracy. It's just everything else that's kind of a little bit of a letdown. I will say, within this Racing Spirits thing, and that's where I was at, was the 11s. The 11s are not in the All Japan Touring Series. They are in the what was known as the the Fuji Freshman Series, which was a lower class support series that ran with the JTC in the early years. Anyway, these 3 kits, which I'm about to show you here, are just Japanese touring car vehicles, and the thing about these kits that were done in the mid-2000s when they were released as these vehicles were, in addition to having obviously new liveries drawn up for them that didn't exist in the past, had new racing interiors done for them. So there is a possibility, now granted, getting the Racing Spirits kits are not that necessarily easy. They're not very, very expensive, but when you find them, but sometimes finding them is the issue. And, of course, you're dealing with kits that are 10, 15 years old, so some of these decals can be a little iffy, and some of these cases where, a lot of the decal printing is white, is the fact that you might be able to at least, if not crib the entire interior for the Fujimi kit, at least use it as a base for scratch building the rest of the Fujimi's interiors, should you want to go this way. I would say that right now, unless Hasegawa would backdate their R31 to an R30, I don't really foresee any R30 kits being done in the immediate future. We'll talk more about that again in the last video. But in the meantime, these 3 kits, like I said, are available. They were released in 2008-ish, I want to say. right before we started doing the video series, and they are 3 of the 1987 season cars. You have the Diesel Keke Bushiba Skyline, the Leighton House Skyline, which is probably the only time that Leighton House ran off of something that was not a Group C car or an F1 car. And then there's also an Advan. Now, all of these are RS turbos, which are, the car that came after, to a certain extent, the 85 car. The 87 cars had a little bit of a different updated body to just a little bit, bits and pieces wise. Now, whether or not they're actually any different, I doubt. I mean, I'm pretty sure if you took these two kits and sat them side by side, they're going to be pretty similar. Actually, I probably do that with a couple of the street R30s I have, because I have the Tommy Kara Fujimi kit, and I have the most recent reissue of the R30 RS Turbo kit street car. So I'm pretty sure I could probably set them down next to each other. Maybe I'll do that in preference as we prepare for the 1989 season video, just to show you what the bodies look like and things like that. But like I said, those racing interiors are only in those 3 kits. They're not parts that came with any of the other vehicles. So, like I said, that covers sort of like a few other things that are back there in history, as it were. The Aoshima kits are going to be a little bit better than the Fujimi kits. All of them are going to be a compromise in the sense that they will be shelf models. I know it's one of the things we talk about here just in the staff project stuff in general, when we do staff reports of, there are model kits out there that are kits that you could build into competition kits, and then there are kits that you are stuck as it is with them being shelf models. And a lot of these early 80s Fujimi Aoshima race car kits are going to be shelf models. They are going to be things that are there simply for the purpose of saying, hey, look, I've got this kit of this car, and there's not really a whole heck of a lot else you're going to be able to do with them in the sense of showing them per se, because they're not really contest models. I know. And a whole bunch of you guys are out there screaming right now, I don't build for contests, I build for myself, and you can all shut up about that, because I can't stand that. We all build for ourselves unless you're getting paid for it. That's an old hack excuse, which is sort of a side tangent that we'll talk about on the actual weekly show, because of what's going on in the actual model world itself. I don't want to dabble in that in this series too much, because it'll get off tangent. So anyway, the 1988 series. Well, you have, as we mentioned in the last one, you have the Ford Sierra RS 500 Group A car. This kit, as it stands, represents the 1988 All Japan Touring Car Championship car. The decals in this vehicle allow you to build either as the number 22 car, which is what the box art car is, and this is how the car ran in the 1988 Intertech Series race at the end of the year. Because of the way the Intertech series would run, they would always sort of Shanghai, if you will, the numbers that were run by various teams. So a lot of times you'll see, and we'll show you that in exactly what I'm talking about in the next kit we're going to talk about, that the Intertech teams, the teams that ran JTC all season long, would have to give their numbers up and run different numbers, because these European drivers and things like that would come in would get preferential treatment on their numbers. So this car, this Chessie Puma Panini car, would run actually 3 different sets of numbers. Now, these are the decals. They're kind of, old. These might technically be serviceable because they're not cracked if you threw them in the window real quick. But the number 1 car is how the car ran in its first race of the season. The number 22 car is how it ran at the Intertech. And then it actually ran as the number 11 car a couple of times during the year. But there aren't enough ones in these decals to run it that way. One thing to look out for in these Ford Sierra kits, and it goes for both of them, this one and the Texaco AJTCC car, is that these only have a back half of a roll cage. Even though they show a full roll cage in the actual drawing, you will have to replicate everything from the B-pillar forwards if that matters to you. I'm not exactly sure why they drew it up that to show all that when it doesn't actually have that, but it is what it is. You're not going to go back and have Tommy fix a 20-year-old model kit at this point. So one of the other cars, these are both going to be B-Max kits that ran in the 1988 season, of which there are kits of, is you have the introduction of the AE92 Kroll 11. This car is the Tom's Toyota livery, the Minolta livery that would become very famous through the ongoing years of the 80s and 90s of JTCC because it would run on this car, and then it would run, of course, on the Supras that would come in a little bit later. These kits from BMAX do run that odd little, front-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive wheels combination, which is always fun because of the way the cars ran, and they did actually tool the wheels that way. This is not a scenario where you get, 2 sets of 2 wheels each. These cars are built, as far as the decals go, to do 2 different variations of the vehicle. Now, this is the color call-out for the kit itself. And these 137, and I'll grab the actual decals here to show you the rest of it. The 137 and the 136 are the numbers that this car was forced to run in the 1988 Intertech series. Again, the Europeans came in and took their numbers. If you look on here, there's also a 6 and a 7. The 6 and 7 are the numbers that the car ran during the actual, real life, if you will, JTCC season. So it is possible that if you wanted to go out and buy 4 of these, if you really, really, really like this Minolta livery, to build all 4 cars, the team cars as they ran during the year itself, and the team cars as they ran in the Intertech series. There is another set of livery for this, but it's not going to be for this year, so we'll just sort of skip that for a second. But if you really want to build as many cars as are livery, you need 5. The other 1988 season kit that is out there is the second release of the BMAX Honda Civic EF3 Group A car. Now, there is an EF9 that was just released a couple weeks ago, but this is the EF3, the 1988 season car. There is livery in here to do 2 different seasons worth of cars, but we're only really interested in the one. So this is, again, another neutral kit. This kit came out, trying to think of what, if I get the instructions. Oops, I lost something over the side there. Wheels and tires. Wheels and tires seem to always fall out of these kits when you're digging in them. This kit was released in September of 2016, so it's a relatively new release, and it builds the modal liveried Civics. Now, we talked about the 1987 3MD decals that turned the Civic ST, or the SIAT, into the modal livery. Well, here's the modal livery continuing into the 1988 season. So these decals pretty much are a situation where you paint the car white and the decals will do everything else. If I could fish the decals out of here, they went sliding too somewhere. I don't know where where my decals went. Oh, there. I put them in the box top so that they would not get damaged. So there are your decals. I believe you actually have to paint a little bit of a thing here, or maybe not. I'd have to dig the decals actually out and compare the two, because while we're not actually going into the 1989 season per se, this kit is a 2-in-1 because it does give you the option to build the 1989 season modal car as well. So there are a slight variation in the coloring. Obviously, one's got a white roof, one's got a red roof. You will have to paint this one's roof red because there's not a great big roof decal for it. But the side stripes that have the modal wording in them on this season, as well as the side stripes on the closer to the front fender, those are in the kit itself. So this one would be the easier one to paint because you would just have to paint a little bit of little bit of white and red two-tone. This one obviously is a white and red two-tone with the roof and the hood being red as well. So those are your options within this kit itself. So keep that in mind. We'll flash back to this kit real quick in the next video because we want to keep the seasons together. But that is your video for the 1988 season. So a couple of build options out there for you. The EF3 has some other build options if you want to do different, seasons of the car. We'll cover those. There are some Gia Race Macau decals and things like that available for it. But out of the box, as it stands, those are the 1988 season decals and kits for the All Japan Touring Car Series. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll see you guys on the other side.